of this match. He's playing against Cayden Hartman, who is playing Esper Control. You see Joe with a Growth Spiral, among other things, to get this game started. Now there's a copy of Wilderness Reclamation. A Glacial Fortress there for Cayden, and now Joe's going to play a copy of Revitalize. This also, well, it looks very close, I will say, to the list that won that MCQ on Magic Online. But Joe's got some changes because Joe is always one to change things up a little bit here. A couple main deck copies of Hydroid Crisis as an example.
Yeah, I'm trying to see what. Yeah, it looks like he cut the 2 copies or the 4 copies of Depose Deploy, and is instead playing 2 copies of Absorb and 2 copies of Hydroid Crisis.
He's also got Settle.
And Settle.
Yeah, he's got 3 minute copies of Settle. So Joe has definitely changed some things up here.
No copies of Opt. Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot less cantripping in this deck.
Okay. I know the cantripping is something you liked about that list. That did well in Magic Online.
I do like it a lot. I mean, I'd certainly respect having some main deck counterspells, and Settle the Wreckage is a card I think gets a lot better if people are not really playing around it, which is kind of the case here. As you see, Lossett win a counter war over a Search for His Kanta. But I think that the cantripping just structurally makes a lot of sense to me.
Big surprise, Joe has the old copy of Absorb.
Yes.
Yeah, big surprise.
Ready to go.
Yeah. Maybe a copy of Thought Eraser. Growth Spiral, Wilderness Reclamation, and Teferi are the cards that Cayden has the opportunity to choose from. Hard to pass up on taking Teferi here, but Cayden is in serious trouble unless that Search for His Kanta gets blown up by a Mortify. Here's a copy of Growth Spiral. That's going to resolve. So Joe will draw a card and potentially put a land on the battlefield. He will there in Sunpetal Grove. Now Joe will draw. Hinterland Harbor is going to go in the graveyard. Search for His Kanta is transforming, and I think this is bad news for Cayden Hartman.
Absolutely. That you needed to mortify in that spot. And this is why I think people were probably trying a little too hard to really go off with Wilderness Reclamation, because just as Kanta, the Sunken Ruin plus Wilderness Reclamation is a win condition. Your opponent's not going to be able to get out of your ability to find a bunch of root snares, to be able to cobble together infinite turns. And in Lossett's case, he's going to be able to set this all up with Counterspell backup because he's playing a couple of main deck Absorbs. You don't need to go all the way off for this deck to be really powerful.
Here's a Teferi. Looks like we're going to see a search activation, and that'll be a copy of Chemister's Insight. Looks like Teferi's going to resolve here for Cayden. Isolated Chapel is a land. Chemister's Insight is going to be played before Teferi untaps 2. Now Teferi will untap those 2 lands. We'll head back over to Joe, who's going to tap all 8 of his. There's land number 9 in Glacial Fortress. Joe's going to start things off by activating Escanta. On a copy of Wilderness Reclamation. Going to play a copy of Wilderness Reclamation. We know they work well on multiples, and I like the way that Joe's actually tapping one to the side and letting know that this one is resolved, and I still have another one to resolve. Joe has always been very clear about his game actions.
Yep.
Something we've always liked about him when we watch him play is there's a copy of Nexus of Fate. I'm not convinced Cayden's going to get another turn, as Joe's going to float a whole bunch of mana and look to resolve Nexus. Nexus is going to resolve. He's going to shuffle that back in. And we might see a lot of a priority for Joe Lossett here and not so much for Cayden Hartman. As now here's 4 mana. Another copy of Chemister's Insight. Joe will draw 2 more. And now he'll activate Escanta and find a copy of Root Snare. Not so much for this matchup, as Joe will now draw. And he's starting to really take control of this game. There is the Arch.
It's another backup thing to draw a card if Lossett's got a bunch of mana left over and as Kanta's used up. But
yeah, that card's always been a little bit interesting to me because I was never sure how good it was in this deck. But in combination with Wilderness Reclamation, it makes some sense.
It's a 3-color deck, and especially with Lossett playing with Absorb, there's only so much of lands that don't make colored mana that you can really handle.
Mm-hmm.
But again, this deck is much more trying to go off at a low opportunity cost. And 1 copy of that land is another way to do it. It's not as smooth as Escanta, but it's just another path.
Also, few things are as smooth as Escanta.
No, this card is so busted.
Joe's going to activate it for a second time this turn. Remember, he's already resolved Nexus of Fate this turn. This is his first untap Wilderness Reclamation. Again, you can notice that because of the one that is tilted. And Cayden says, I'm not going to get another turn, am I?
No.
No, you're not, Cayden. No, you are not. For Cayden and Joe, Cayden is going to go to his sideboard. What do you have in front of you there?
I have a Lyra Dawnbringer, a Cry of the Cranarium, 2 Moment of Craving, a Plague Crafter, 2 Hostage Taker, 4 Thief of Sanity, 2 Negate, and then Nezal Primal Tide. The 4 Thief of Sanities and the 2 Negates.
I think those are the easy ones to bring in.
Easy ones to bring in.
No real reason to bring in Nezal, right? It's too expensive.
I think it's too expensive, and the rest of this is pretty much just anti-mono red measures, some anti-mid-range measures that don't really apply here.
Other side of things here for Joe, we got a Hydroid Krasis. That's number 3 throughout his 75. 3 Negates of his own, 3 Frilled Mystic. That's been a big addition. Ali Antrazi really bringing that on the map last week. We've got 3 Knight of Autumns, 2 Lyra Dawnbringers, 2 Cleansing Novas, and then a copy of Crushing Canopy.
I really love the Frilled Mystics, the Negates, and the extra copy of Hydroid Krasis. You can get away from some of the fog, the anti-creature stuff. You know, you don't have to have your copies of Settle the Wreckage necessarily, the Revitalizes, the Root Snares. A lot of easy cards to take out here. I think those are major upgrades.
Well, those are the options there for both players. They're going to get game number 2 underway here in just a moment. Cayden Hartman kind of getting bushwhacked in that particular game. I guess we could call that pretty close to easy mode there for Joe. There's just a lot of stuff that Cayden's got to counter and try to stop in game 1.
Yeah, he's got some counters. He's got some Mortifies. They're a little overtaxed, and if he ever misses a beat here, as we saw, having a window to interact with Search for Visconta, not being able to do it, and then from there it's just easy mode for Lossett, as you mentioned.
Hartman's going to be on the play. We'll see if he's able to keep his 7. He will start things off with a Hallowed Fountain, as will Joe Lossett. A very powerful Thought Eraser, a card that Ari Lax has deemed the best card in Standard, at least for right now, will resolve. You'll see Lossett's hand, a couple of lands there. There's also a Wilderness Reclamation and a copy of Absorb in hand. And Wilderness Reclamation will be the selection. We'll go back over to Joe now. There's a Hinterland Harbor and just a passing of the turn, so back over to Hartman, who will play a Glacial Fortress and pass it back over to Joe. These 3-color mana bases, they work quite well in the format.
Yeah, your ideal opening is a turn 1 tap Ravnica duel and then bridging it together with the M10 duels to have all of your mana and have a lot of it enter the battlefield untapped.
Be another copy of Thought Eraser here. We'll see if this will resolve or not.
Yeah, Lossett, you know, there's an argument to fight over this just because, you know, he can take the Absorb, but also it may be a spot where if you absorb, then Hartman gets to cash in a Syncopate for really good value. So Lossett may prefer to just try to play around Syncopate for as long as possible, even if it means Hartman taking the Absorb out of his hand and getting to see Lossett's hand.
Well, Joe elected to play a Growth Spiral in response. Nexus of Fate's going to be the selection. You can see the rest of Joe's hand: Absorb, Frilled Mystic, and 2 lands. Frilled Mystic could be a real difference maker in this kind of matchup.
Yep. It's just it's a different angle of attack to sort of play on top of your Hydroid Krasis. And it's like certainly not weak in the spots where you're going off as well.
It'll be a Sun Petal Grove. Pass the turn back over to Hartman. Hartman will play another land there in Drawn Catacombs and pass the turn back over to Lossett. Both these players with 6 lands. Joe will go up to 7 lands. Hartman will draw. You expect the games after sideboard to be a little bit slower, but for Esper Control, they have to work through a bunch of counter magic now. You saw Joe's hand with the Absorb and the copy of Frilled Mystic. Hartman's got to try to work himself through that to try to resolve something like a Karn, which just doesn't seem feasible at this stage.
And, you know, something that really stands out to me here is Hartman's inability to pressure Lossett's mana at the end of Joe's turn. Hartman, everything good that Hartman can do is on his own turn. It's either Thought Erasure or try to resolve a Planeswalker. And you can see it's really risky for him to tap out, lose the counter war, and then Lossett gets to land one of his marquee cards. It'd be really good if Hartman had even some sort of card drawing spell, something where he could use his mana at the end of Lossett's turn to try to bridge together, resolving a major play without putting the shields down.
Lossett now, this is going to be his first turn of 2 from Nexus of Fate resolving. Hydroid Krasis is where he's going to start things. And that, again, is a 6/6 that drew 3 cards. There's a Glacial Fortress. Now Joe's going to get the opportunity to untap here in just a moment.
City's Blessing also is 9 lands plus Hydroid Krasis, so the Arch is turned on as well.
That's the big thing to note. Okay, well, Mortify will take care of that, and that's all well and good. I mean, that's something that Cayden has to kill. But as you mentioned, those are overtaxed.
Yeah, and that's a big win for Lossett. I mean, you know, the Mortifies you're really hoping to save for Wilderness Reclamation or Search for Visconta. So getting to trade it off with a creature here for Lossett, I mean, he'll take it.
Joe does have a Teferi in hand now. Looks like he's thinking about casting that. There is Teferi. That's going to resolve, so Lossett will draw a card. He'll be untapping 2 lands at some point during this turn as well. And I'm just not sure. I'm not going to call a game over, of course, because we don't actually know the result, but I would be shocked if Joe lost this game.
The path of just keep all your mana open, pass from Esper Control is a dead end in this matchup. That's not going to be able to get it done here. I don't know if, you know, what's the, I forget the name, the card drawing spell with addendum.
The big one?
Precognitive perception.
Yeah. Premonition.
Premonition.
Yeah, yep.
Just something where if Lossett says go, you do something to advance your game state a little bit. Hartman's just sitting here with 1-for-1s in his hand, hoping that Lossett's playing into it. With Search for his Kanta, with Arch, with Chemist's Insight, Lossett can just hang back and draw extra cards. There's no pressure for him to do anything.
Here you see the stack. Vraska's Contempt was going to try to go after Teferi. Absorb took care of that. Now Chemist's Insight is going to resolve. And I'm with you. If Cayden has Thief of Sanity on turn 3, different game, because Joe has to act.
Yeah.
But outside of that, Joe doesn't have to do anything, and it all plays favorably for him, as we're seeing in this game.
You either need to draw more cards than Lossett or get the game over with, and Hartman is doing neither. So you're just doomed if that's your setup.
Lossett's going to do a little bit of untapping here. Here's Nexus. Might be a runaway now.
Yep.
See, this was, I think we talked about this during Indy too. We knew that going into Indy that players were going to really gravitate towards Wilderness Reclamation solely because of the power level. But getting it right on week 1, it's complex.
Right.
Right? But as we work ourselves into the format more and figure out exactly what the aggro decks and the mid-range decks are going to look like, and every deck really, this deck can kind of tailor itself to trying to beat those decks. We saw that in the MCQ on Magic Online. We're seeing it now with Lossett with the changes that he's made to the deck. And Esper Control was very popular last weekend. It's looking horrible right now.
Well, you don't, what Lossett is demonstrating here is that you don't need a whole lot of infrastructure devoted to the deck to being good once you have all the mana in the world to work with. I mean, you can Search for his Kanta or Teferi is more than enough to win once you're cobbling together multiple turns or untapping all of your lands over and over again. So you don't need to do all that.
Here's a Karn.
The expansion expulsion, which is just rotting in your hand, not doing anything if your opponent's not cooperating or you don't have a lot of mana, that's just not, you don't need to construct it that way.
Karn will resolve. Maybe it's a fairy that'll go underneath it. Hallowed Fountain added to the hand, quickly placed onto the battlefield here. Now here's an activation of that powerful land. Then, you know, just a nice little one of in a 3-color deck, but able to draw some cards because of the City's Blessing. Lossett's going to untap. Search for his Kanta, trigger. He wants that one. Looks like it may have been a copy of Wilderness Reclamation as Teferi's going to draw a card. And I think Wilderness Reclamation might just be the missing piece to the puzzle, as there's the powerful enchantment. Cayden only has 2 cards in hand. You know, I just don't.
Yeah. No, we're
playing out the home stretch, perhaps.
We're all done here.
Yeah. And Joe's going to add a bunch of mana. There's at least one Nexus. And it looks like this match may have ended. Not quite sure what happened on that instance.
We were done. We were done.
Yeah.
We're done.
Yeah.
Set's going to take all the turns.
Oh, you think so?
You get a Teferi Emblem.
Run up the clock.